So welcome to the Alexander Meiklejohn Lecture, which Alexander Meiklejohn was a very famous and deep thinking scholar about the principles of education, and in particular free speech and the Constitution. And we've had an endowed Alexander Meiklejohn Lecture for quite some time at Brown. We're thrilled today, sponsoring the Taubman Center, and I wear some hats, those of you who've seen me this year. So I am the director. My name is Wendy Schiller, and I'm the Allison S. Ressler Professor of Political Science. I'm also the director of the Taubman Center for American Politics and Policy, and I am, there's plenty of seats over here. No, okay, you got a seat? Okay. And I am the interim director of the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, which is launching as a school of the Thomas J. Watson School of International and Public Affairs, July 1st. So we have a terrific panel tonight. This is going to be our run of show. We have two gentlemen who have a lot to say, and they're going to say it to each other. For the first part of our time together. And then about 6:45, we'll stop and we'll ask questions. And we do have microphones so that you don't have to get out of your seats to ask the questions. I do want to reiterate Brown's general standing policy on protest. Brown is an institution that stands for free speech in all cases, but we do not permit individuals to disrupt, block, stop a talk or a presentation, either vocally with other forms of noise or with plaques or cards that block other people's view. So that's our principle. We've had a very successful year. We encourage you to ask anything you'd like in the Q&A, but that's our current principle.
Does that apply to the speakers as well?
Free speech abounds at Brown. So I'm going to go in both alphabetical order and the order of who went to Brown and who didn't go to Brown in my introductions. So on your left is Tom Perez, Brown, class of '83. He's the son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic. He grew up in Buffalo, where he learned the values of a union town, hard work, integrity, service, and perseverance. After putting himself through college with Pell Grants and working on the back of a garbage truck, Tom passed up offers from white shoe law firms, instead choosing to start his career as a civil rights attorney for the U.S. Justice Department, prosecuting racially motivated hate crimes. Tom had the privilege of serving in President Obama's administration, first as the head of the Department's Civil Rights Division, where he led the charge against police misconduct, voter suppression, anti-LGBTQ discrimination, and immigrant-bashing sheriff's departments. Then as Secretary of Labor, fighting to protect and expand opportunities for America's working people, from better wages and overtime pay to retirement security and collective bargaining rights. Thank you, Othniel, for putting up with me. I like people to have cups. I'm my mother's daughter. In 2017, Tom Perez was elected chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Tom's strongest roots are in local organizing. In 2002, became the first Latino elected to the Montgomery County Council, and as board president of Casa de Maryland, Tom helped grow the organization from a small service provider in the basement of a church to one of the largest immigrant advocacy groups in the Mid-Atlantic. Tom has also served as a senior fellow at the Watson Institute, and we welcome him back to campus today. Michael Steele has also served as a senior fellow at the Watson Institute. Michael Steele was elected Lieutenant Governor of Maryland in 2003. Michael Steele made history as the first African-American elected to statewide office, and again with his subsequent chairmanship of the Republican National Committee in 2009. As chairman of the RNC, Michael Steele was charged with revitalizing the Republican Party. A self-described Lincoln Republican under Steele's leadership, the RNC broke fundraising records, raising over almost $200 million during the 2010 cycle, and Republicans won 63 House seats, the biggest pickup since 1938. His commitment to grassroots organization and party building at the state and local levels produced 12 governorships and the greatest share of state legislative seats since 1928. Yes, over 638 seats you picked up in 2010. Democrats have that imprinted on their brain. Because redistricting happened in 2012, and so it was probably, I would argue, one of the most consequential elections, even today, was the 2010 elections at the state and federal level. As Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, Mr. Steele's priorities included reforming the state's minority business enterprise program, improving the quality of Maryland's public education system, and where he championed the state's historic charter school law, expanding economic development in the state, and fostering cooperation between government and faith-based organizations to help those in need. Mr. Steele's ability as a communicator and commentator has been showcased through his current role as a political analyst for MSNBC. He's appeared on Meet the Press, Face the Nation, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, Comedy Central's Daily Show, and numerous other programs. He was born at Andrews Air Force Base in Prince George's County, Maryland. Mr. Steele was raised in Washington, D.C. upon graduating Johns Hopkins University in 1981, also a pretty good school. He entered the Order of St. Augustine, where he studied for the priesthood. He is also a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, class of 91. So they are going to engage. They have planned their run of show, so even I will be surprised. And then we will kick off questions about, give or take, between, about 40 minutes from now. Okay?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor Schiller. It's so good to see you again. I'm going to just stand up for a minute. I'm going to sit down for most of it, but I have a question right away. Are you a Buffalo Bills fan, sir? Okay, I want to give you a seat right in the front here, okay? So I just needed to move him down, okay? Because you're my new best friend. I'm sorry, I digress. It is really great to be here. And I happen to have had the privilege of attending the Meiklejohn Lecture a number of times when I was here because my mentor, the late, great Ed Beiser, was intimately involved in that. So I remember it well. And as I was reflecting on this moment, I can't help but think about what I believe is one of the most important dependent clauses in our American lexicon, which is, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. I reflect on that a lot. Why do I do that? Because from the inception of our country, almost 250 years ago, we were imperfect. We did bad things. We fell short of our ideals. You look at the Constitution itself. We knew slavery was taking place, and yet we did nothing about it in the Constitution. By the way, before the Constitution was passed, our earliest settlers here in New England, if you had gay sex, that was a death penalty offense. Not making this up. You look at the Know Nothing movement of the mid-1800s, a fundamentally anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-anything that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, supermajorities and legislators across the country. You go and you look at the iconic connection of the Transcontinental Railroad in Utah. What is notably missing? The Chinese railroad workers who built the damn thing, and in many cases gave their lives. But we didn't respect them. In fact, the Chinese Exclusion Act made it more difficult to move forward. We know what happened to Japanese residents here during World War II. We know what happened during the Red Scare of McCarthy. We know what happened to Rosa Parks. We know what happened to the Woolworth Five. We know what happened when we were imperfect. We know what happened to so many women in the aftermath of Dobbs. And it's still happening. Thank you. And folks, during these periods, we saw so many people. How did the Know Nothing movement end? It didn't end, or it didn't just end one day. Because it ended, these movements ended because we formed a more perfect union. People organized. Parties organized. Coalitions built. People said, we can do better than this. And that's how we moved forward. We have each confronted challenges when we were the heads of our respective parties. We both took over when we were in a ditch. A pretty big ditch in 2009 for the Republicans, a pretty big ditch in 2017. But I must say, this moment feels different, qualitatively different, because we really are having a conversation about our democracy writ large. We really are having a conversation about what does Article 1 mean. Literally yesterday, I was with a guy named Erwin Chemerinsky, the dean of the law school at Berkeley. And at the event that we were at together, he talked about, and you should look up his most recent essay in the New York Times. And he said, and I'll simply paraphrase, this is the scariest moment of my life as I look at our constitutional crisis. And the question he was debating is, will Donald Trump obey orders of a court? And we see that crisis before us. And what we're going to do over the next hour, 15 minutes, is really talk about it in detail. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think Dean Chemerinsky was absolutely right yesterday. This is as serious as it gets. But I will tell you, and I think I speak for Michael in saying, we both have remarkable faith in the collective power of we in this country. And we will talk about that because I am an eternal optimist. My parents came here because they got kicked out of the Dominican Republic, because they spoke out against a brutal dictator. They saw authoritarianism front and center, and they did something about it. And they helped build a more perfect union. They served in this army, my uncles. They weren't citizens yet, but they were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for their adopted country, as was my dad. And so I know right now that this moment, and if Professor Meiklejohn were alive, I suspect he would agree with Dean Chemerinsky that this is indeed a very, very serious and grave moment for our democracy. But I'm equally confident, because my wife went to Madison, and he also taught at University of Wisconsin, so I got a twofer on this. I'm equally confident that he would say we are anything but powerless. And when we organize and when we mobilize, we can succeed. Not without short-term damage, without a doubt, but we can do this. So, Michael.
Oh, great.
And then we will start having a little discussion.
Great. Now I get to follow that. That's fun. Well, it's a real treat for me to be back here at Brown. I really enjoyed my time here at Watson and engaging with the student body here. COVID interrupted that, unfortunately. But I have very, very fond memories. So when the opportunity to come back was presented, I was like, yes, absolutely, no brainer, make it happen. So I'm glad to be here. I'm going to tee off of what Tom said in the sense that we the people is fundamentally my North Star. It is what has anchored me in politics and in life, coupled with my time in a monastery, sort of anchoring and focusing my soul on my calling to serve people, and how all of that kind of comes together. For me, has been very, very important and very, very powerful in everything I've done. So I'm going to lay on the table for you what I lay on the table for myself. We are where we are because this is where we want to be. It's not complicated. We can dress it up, we can dance it around, and we can say, well, I did this, I showed up, I voted, yeah. But that's not how our society is organized. It is organized around the idea that we all get to play and we all get to pay, right? So we're here because this is where we have decided to be. 10 million fewer of our American citizens decided to participate this time around because this is where they wanted to be. They knew what was at the gates, right? They knew what was being foretold. It was written in a 900-page document called Project 2025. Okay. It was splayed out every day by Donald Trump. He told, now look, if I walked up to you, sir, and I said, I want to rob your house, would you take me seriously or not? You take me seriously, right? If I told you I want to be a dictator, would you take me seriously or not? So why would you take my coming up to you and saying, I'm going to steal something from you? I'm just letting you know, tonight, I'm going to come to your house and I'm breaking in. What would you do? You take precautions, right? You'd at least alert the authorities that this could happen. You take it seriously. So when the man that we want to elect to be the president of our country tells you, I want to be a dictator, I want retribution, why didn't you believe him? Why'd you stay home? Why didn't you care? That's the question that we all now have to deal with. It doesn't matter if you voted for or against Donald Trump. We all now have to live in the we of that decision. If those words mean anything, if we believe in a society in which the majority of us gets to decide for all of us a particular outcome, if that still holds value for you, then how mad can you get? It begs the question, how much did you do? How much did you engage? How much did you take seriously the threat? Or maybe you didn't perceive it as a threat, and that's fine. That's the beauty of the we. We all come at it differently. We all appreciate it differently. I come at it, as I told people, from my time with Trump back in 2013. I didn't just show up at this dance. I knew what I was dealing with. I tried to warn people inside the party. I told Marco Rubio. I told all these guys, this is what it is. You're about to get your butts punked. And they did. So, I guess we now believe the words of Maya Angelou, right? Someone tells you who they are, probably kind of believe them. So that's, I think, the exploration of the conversation for me. Understanding and appreciating we're here because this is where we placed ourselves. And we will be here for as long as we want to be here. No matter how mad some of us get. Because our country is organized around a fundamental principle that we, the people, have been required by the founders and the paper that they wrote on to organize ourselves. That we, the people, are the government of this country. I may elect you, ma'am. I may elect you, sir, but I'm the government. You represent me. The part two of the problem is that we have ceded our power to you. And now we think the elected official is more important than we are. How do we know that? Because every year, every 2 years, 93, 94, 95, 97, 98% of them get reelected. In the throes of doing absolutely jack. Why are we now sitting, 24 hours out from a government shutdown? How many times have we been in this room? How many times have we listened to the whiners in Washington complain about having to shut the government down because they can't do a damn budget? We can do a continuing resolution. We can just punt it down the road for another 6 months. Oh, give us another 4 months. Give us another 8 months. And then all of a sudden it's September of the next year and you're trying to figure out what the budget is for the succeeding year when you haven't passed the one for the year you're in. And yet, we'll reelect them. I love my congressman. Yours sucks. What do you think she's saying? She loves her congressman. Mine sucks. Well, it should occur to us that they all suck right now. Honestly, because the founders would be highly upset by what they're seeing happening in the House. Very much upset, because that was not how they designed the system. There's a reason for checks and balances. There's a reason why we do not place authority in one individual. George Washington walked away from that. There's a reason why we don't place all the power in the House or the Senate. That's why the House is this raucous chamber where, hey, yeah, party at Bernie's, right? Mm-hmm. And the Senate is like, could you pass me another Grey Poupon with some, right? That kind of separation, distinction. So we understand fundamentally how the system has been set up and how the system has been organized, and we know intellectually why it was done that way. We appreciate historically the importance of doing it. So why do we allow ourselves to let this madness happen? When did you stop becoming or put it this way, when did you stop being a citizen? When did you take yourself out of the we? And then ask yourself, why? Do you really want this side of the room to decide everything for that side of the room without any participation, without any engagement from any of you? To effectively say, we have the power and the control now, sit back, relax, and take it. So we are where we are because this is where you want us to be.
Well, that was uplifting. We need to delve directly into the crisis that we currently face. At the same time, I think it's important.
You can't get to uplifting until you deal with
No, you got to. I think it.
Right. That's my.
Here's my whole theory of leadership: is you plan, execute, reflect, iterate, and improve. We need.
That's way too much work.
We need to be. We've been doing a lot of reflection, and here is my own diagnosis of a mega trend that Democrats did not sufficiently appreciate. The basic bargain of America is that every generation is going to be a little better off than the preceding generation. That is not the lived experience of so many people across this country. The Democratic Party has become the party of the elites. The biggest determiner of who you're going to vote for right now, what is it? Education. We are getting creamed. The Republican Party of 2024, and this pains me to say, if you just look at election results, became the party of the working class. Non-college educated, lower income folks voted disproportionately for Donald Trump. This is the first time since in my lifetime where we did so much better with college educated people than with non-college educated folks. And I've sat in on a few focus groups recently, and it's really compelling to listen. I'm just trying to get to the end of the month. And when I hear her say, I'll just do whatever Joe Biden did, like she doesn't understand me. I love the vice president, by the way. Worked my tail off for her. But this is the reflection stage. We got to understand where we went wrong. And this wasn't something where we went wrong in 2024. This has been a festering challenge for us for a number of years. And There's this myth that don't worry about it. Demographics are destiny. And young people will be with us for good. Latinos, African Americans, API, we don't need to worry about it. Demographics are destiny. That is not right. And that's the most polite term I can think of. I spent 3 years of my life prosecuting Border Patrol agents who did really bad things along the Arizona-Mexico border. And I can tell you some of the most virulent anti-immigrant sentiment I saw in the grand jury consistently was first-generation Latinos. And by the way, it's not limited to Latinos. And they understood that we can have tough border security, and we can't account for the fact that Tio Jose, who's been here 30 years, is undocumented and has been doing everything by the rules. We ought to give him a pathway as well. But I bring it up because we just assumed that, okay, we've got critical mass, so we're going to do okay. And we didn't understand the economic pain that so many people are enduring. And we paid a price for that because for reasons that I still have trouble processing, you know, Donald Trump was able to speak to that. And they believe that he's going to do it for us on the economy.
There's some basic reasons why Donald Trump was able to speak to that. And I think it's not something, it's something that I think has largely been lost by our political class and our media class, especially our media class. I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating it is to watch the capitulation in media. But the fundamental thing that folks act like, okay, Donald Trump just kind of walked onto the political stage and then just, you know, ramshackled the Republican House, beat the hell out of 16 people standing on a debate stage in 2015 and 2016, and then became president. What is missing is Donald Trump had forged a relationship with Americans long before he decided to run for president. He was on their TVs every week firing people, looking like he was in charge. He was the boss man. He was seen hosting these beautiful women and these wonderful pageants for the Miss America pageant and doing all of this, you know, so just surrounded by these lovely faces and voices and young women especially talking and saying nice things about him. He spent, you know, 15 years in that space on national television. But even before that, he was hanging out with the rap community in Harlem, right? He was out there, you know, just sort of... Pardon me?
WWE.
WWE, right? He's out there WWE tossing himself around the ring. Donald Trump did one thing that's fundamentally important to understand that neither Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama were able to do, and we'd say they were pretty damn good communicators, right? But not the way Trump. Trump was the P.T. Barnum of communication because Trump was able to bring his viewers into politics and make them his voters. You want to know why he never lost more than 38% within the Republican Party, and even including some independent voters out there, is because they've been with him on this ride for the last 15, 20 years. They knew the man. So when the Access Hollywood tape happened, right, women were like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that, grab him by the, oh my God. And you know what a whole lot more women were saying? It's kind of lock and talk. It's Lockatark. Yeah, guys talk like that. It's Trump. He's around beautiful women all the time. What do you expect? And people are shocked that 52% of white female voters voted for him in 2016. Right? So you have to understand the thing in front of you before you know how to address it. And that has been a fundamental problem. Donald Trump has played an asymmetrical game from day one. Not 2015, 16, but going back 20 years. Because all along the way, Donald Trump was always charting, how do I break into that game and own that game? Donald Trump is on record as saying, when I assessed the two parties, I had one thing I had to keep in mind, which one I could control. That was his assessment. And here's what I learned in working with him. He is so arrogant in his thinking. He is so right in where he's coming from. He will tell you everything he's going to do. You know why? Because he doesn't think you can stop him. Has he been proven wrong? Mm-hmm. Is he in jail now, folks? Mm-hmm. You just reelected him president of the United States. That's what he knew you would do.
Well, in fairness to this group, we'll say the
I'm
American people just elected him. I'm just trying
right.
to... I was watching you. You were verklempt there, okay? I saw that.
Look, but... I get it. I get the room I'm in.
I want you walking out.
But I don't want you walking. But I'm just trying, look, again, contextualizing, the you is all of us because our system is designed that way. You know what I'm saying? It's a majority of us said yes. 78 million Americans said yes. 10 million stayed home who voted the last time. By staying home, they said either I don't care or yes.
I'll give you one other data point. So Obama lost Texas by 16 points in 2012. Secretary Clinton lost by 9.2% in 2016. Joe Biden lost by 5% in 2020. And 90% of that trend data was Latino voters. 2024, she lost by 13.7%. Demographics are not destiny.
Right. And that's the challenge that Tom raises is how do the political parties recalibrate? I mean, for all of the stuff that's going on right now inside my party, there is a recalibration that's also going on, right? Because there are voices, even in Trump space, who are thinking about the what next. How do we recalibrate? Because they don't know how much of this is actually going to stick with the voters. How much of MAGA will actually stick in an election cycle. 26 will offer an interesting opportunity for Democrats to create a new narrative around that space, because narrative is not demographic as destiny. Narrative is your destiny. Because narrative is going to get you where you want to go. I'm going to bring you along with the story. You're either going to like the story or you're not, right? And if you don't, guess what you're going to do? You're not coming. That's the Democrats' party. No one likes their story right now. Republican story is not that much better. But what happens is with the Republican story is it makes that connection, right? So I get you jacked up about the price of eggs, right? The election's about the price of eggs. No, it's not. It's about the guy who wants to be a dictator, but he's not telling you that. And so the narratives do matter in how you tell the story of what's happening to the American people. How do I connect to you, sir, right? And how do I connect to this gentleman right here? Generational differences, right? I got to find out what's motivating you and what's motivating you. I know you're probably listening to Joe Rogan, or you're hanging out on WWE, or you're in that space. You, sir, at home, you got your TV on and you're watching cable maybe, right? I'm going to find a way to talk to both of you at the same time. I got to connect the messages for both of you. And the way I do it is the price of eggs. It becomes, or CRT, or DEI, right? I'm going to appeal to something I know about you, and I'm going to work that angle. You have concerns as a young man about being displaced. Okay, let's talk about that, right? Because the people of color in this room is your problem. That's who you're being displaced by. So we got to get rid of DEI and CRT, right? CRT, young white girls in the 6th grade are not learning critical race theory. Can we all agree to that? But a significant number of our fellow Americans did not. They thought they were because of how that message was conveyed to them. So the messaging and the conversation is the destiny that you're going to have to figure out as Democrats. And the problem for Republicans is they think this ride is going to last a lot longer than it will. And they've got to figure out what next, because there's some who are saying J.D. Vance ain't the answer. But then there are also others that say that, getting a Nikki Haley back on the ticket is improbable. So you can see for both parties right now, this tension, they're downplaying it in the expectation that you don't see it or are aware of it. But you actually have more control over what happens next than anything else.
I want to channel my internal Alexander Meiklejohn, if I could, because the crisis of the moment is, look what is happening. He was telling the truth when he said, I want to be a dictator on day one. You saw what happened to USAID. You've seen the, we can go on, the Department of Education. You see all the, 6,000 veterans. J.D. Vance calls Mark Kelly a traitor. And my Latin teacher would say, res ipsa loquitur, like seriously? Again, the reason I bring this up now is because in the immediate moment, we have a real crisis where the Congress is what has the power of the purse. You remember Richard Nixon? And, the Impoundment Act was passed in 1974 because Richard Nixon tried to do the same thing or something similar. FDR, I got to be, both sides of this. FDR tried to pack the court. He was unsuccessful because there were forces, bipartisan forces, that came together and said, no, this is counter to who we are as a democracy. Dr. King once said, we will repent or rue not only the horrific acts of bad people, but the appalling silence of others. And the challenge we have right now is that it is not the party of Lincoln, it is the party of Trump. And I am stunned. I have had a number of quiet conversations with Republican friends who know that this is wrong, and I will name none of them. But they also don't have the courage to speak up. Just as an aside, they're in a big ditch in 2009. They elect Michael Steele to be their party chair. They have historic victories in 2010. And you know what happens? They fired him in 2011. Go figure.
Just too damn good at my job.
Yeah, no. But, the problem, and the reason I bring that up in connection with now, by the way, we see the world very differently on material issues, but this guy is a friend for life. And that's because he's got backbone. And the absence of backbone is precipitating a constitutional crisis right now. They want to take to the court the firing of the NLRB chair. Why? Because they want the court to declare that this is all about accretion of power in the executive branch. And there was a case, Humphrey's executor, it's like 90 years old, where the court said very clearly that, yes, you can have independent agencies in the executive branch. Yes, you can. So you can have the EEOC commissioners having staggered appointments, and you can't fire them when you have a change in the presidency. And my former chief of staff is one of the people who got fired. This, if Alexander Meiklejohn were alive, this, I firmly believe, is what he would want us to spend some time on. Because this is eventually going to go to the court. And about 2 weeks ago, in a 5-4 decision, with, like, I know I'm on thin ice when I'm praying for Roberts and Comey Barrett, but God bless them. And in a 5-4 decision, they upheld effectively that Humphrey's executor decision, but it's going to come back to the court, and they are teeing it up. And the bigger question, which Dean Chemerinsky was talking about yesterday, is what happens when they just say, "Okay, the court's spoken, but that's not what I believe." I mean, did you see what J.D. Vance tweeted last weekend? Like, we don't have to obey, illegitimate decisions. And so who decides the definition of illegitimate? So, I mean, that, to me, the constitutional crisis of the moment is this, because he really is the thing that he was not. I will only be a dictator on day one. No, he wants to set this up in perpetuity for himself and for successors. That is the constitutional crisis of the moment. And full disclosure, I'm on the board of the National Democratic Institute, which is in 59 countries. And by the way, we have a Republican counterpart, IRI. We work together. And parenthetically, where do we get the food that we distribute to countries that are struggling with poverty? Where do you think we get that food from? Farmers in the United States. Guess who is having a lot of heartburn right now? Farmers in the United States. This is, when you have a ready, fire, aim approach to governance, these are the things that happen.
The situation with the farmers and the whole argument around USAID aid, and our fellow Americans who think that is 70% of the budget, when it's literally less 2%. Than,
It's like 2%.
It's not even 2.
Yeah.
I mean, you're barely scratching 1%, right? But what it reminds me of, the after the downstream effects of these decisions are real. And this goes again to the narrative that each of us, I think, have a responsibility to share with our fellow citizens. Starting with please educate yourself. Okay, I know everybody's on a different form of getting their information, and God love you for that. I mean, it's good. It's good. I look at some crazy stuff because I really want to get as well-rounded a view of exactly what's out there. So that I can then form an opinion that is anchored in something that's truthful, real, and honest, but also understanding you're a little bit cray-cray, right? That you're tweeting stuff that's out there in space, and that's fine, right? So, in other words, understand exactly what the universe of information is. And I say that to make this point. The downstream aspects of everything that's happening right now has not landed with the American people. It's about to.
Oh, yeah. April 4th in Wisconsin.
I tweeted out this morning on the way up here in response to the latest little bit of fun news. I can find my tweet real quick because it just summed up for me exactly the moment we find ourselves in when we're sitting here trying to understand how we're all getting punked, and we're getting easily punked by this administration because we're not paying attention. So this morning you had the president on the Mahmoud Khalil situation. Y'all know we're next, right? This is an individual who has a legitimately earned green card. He's here legally, and the only thing he did was speak out.
And an 8
He organized, to Tom's point, he organized on Columbia University campus during the height of the Gaza discussion, debate, protests, right? And what my buddy who wrote this article wrote was, at one point he says, quote, "The question of what Khalil is alleged to have done is important because remember, when Speaker Mike Johnson was asked at the presser just a couple of days ago, sir, give us the evidence of the crime he committed." That's basically the question he was asked. And the speaker could not answer the question. Did not answer the question. So the quote is, "The question of what Khalil is alleged to have done is important, primarily because the most obvious explanation of what prompted his arrest is that he expressed an opinion at odds with the current administration." And the only thing I could, after posting that quote, then my own comment was, fair warning. This is an institution of higher learning. You're supposed to come here and debate and challenge each other. I know Brown has a tendency of being this highly progressive institution. There are a lot of progressives. Great. But if you're not challenging each other in your progressiveness, then you ain't learning ish. Because the world out there is very different from this enclosed environment where you can talk amongst yourselves and find agreement readily, easily. Mm-hmm. But what do you do when you meet someone who absolutely disagrees with you fundamentally and looks at you like you have seven heads because in their view, you do? Mm-hmm. And the next thing they have in mind when looking at a creature with seven heads is to kill it. Mm-hmm. Literally and verbally in any other way they can. So the question I think right now begs itself for all of us is how do we inform ourselves to the point where we can begin to inform others so that we fully understand exactly what's happening. Last point on that. The other piece that this conversation reminds me of when we're talking about the money and we're talking about the farmers, right, is again, another downstream effect. Okay, so you remember how during and ongoing our conversation around our support for Ukraine? And what are our fellow citizens being told about Ukraine in terms of, oh my God, we're spending all this money. We're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars. This is just wasted money we're sending overseas. Y'all know where that money's coming from, right? Y'all know how that money's spent? On our weapons.
American-made weapons.
Americans are building the weapons. And the government is paying them to build the weapons. And then they're being shipped. Not one damn dime that you're spending in that proportion, right? There are humanitarian aid that's going. Mm-hmm. But the military money, the dollars for the military, staying here. American manufacturers of those machines and those tanks and those weapons are building it and being shipped. So how are we wasting our money when we're spending our own cash here at home on our manufacturers and builders of weapons, and they're then sending them overseas per the agreement between the U.S., our allies, and Ukraine? So my point is the downstream is important to understand in these conversations. Because right now, farmers are getting hurt. Why? Because of the tariff policy. But we've been told, well, it's not a tax, it's not hurting anybody, but they are. Ukraine is suffering from lack of aid and support because Americans believe that we're spending too much of our money and it's being wasted, not knowing that we're spending the money on American manufacturers or with American manufacturers that are there to then send those weapons to help them. So the downstream is important to understand.
Well, and there's a number of corollaries to this. You started talking about the Columbia student who's, again, American, U.S. citizen wife and about to be U.S. citizen kid are here. And then there's the law firms that have been targeted. And, I will remind people that John Adams famously defended people who were involved, British soldiers who were involved in the Boston Massacre. That is what democracy is all about. And yeah, no, I understand, but I mean, and historians go back and forth on that. I remember they ebb and flow, but I do think that particular data point is of relevance in this moment, because the firms that are being attacked because they were involved in litigation that they didn't like. And the Viktor Orban playbook, and it's not unique to Viktor Orban. Step 1, emasculate the courts. Step 2, emasculate the press. Step 3, emasculate the institutions of civil society. In the case of Hungary, going after George Soros, who supported higher education and other important elements of civil society there. And this playbook is not unique there to Hungary. It's a playbook that has been used in many places. And it's a playbook that we should be very, very mindful of. And the challenge that we have now, the good news is that we're winning a lot of lawsuits, and there are going to be more lawsuits filed. But, in the end of the day, a number of these are going to come before the Supreme Court. And this is a Supreme Court that, how many of the members are Trump appointed? And did you see what happened at the State of the Union when he approached John Roberts? John Roberts looked like he would rather be any place but where he was at that moment. That was a noteworthy moment there that if Alexander Meiklejohn were alive, I think he would have made note of here. Yes, no, absolutely. So, but again, the last, we should get to questions, but the last question after we get through questions is, what gives you hope? And I will have some insights on that as well, because I don't want anyone leaving here to say, gosh, there's nothing we can do, because I couldn't disagree more with that. So I would love to begin the process of opening it up for folks, and I will. Do you want to moderate
so
who
Neil,
will?
So we're going to go back, and so Neil's going to pass the microphone. So we have one question here, and we usually try to go sort of, left, middle, or right, middle, left. Okay.
One of the
Thank you
things-
for coming.
I don't know, is this on?
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one of the things is both of you being party chairman that made the voters, and I have a question about what Michael Steele said, feel they had no agency, is that again and again and again, we were told it's going to come down to the Electoral College. And we weren't in the swing states. And we were not in the swing states. So people felt their vote didn't count. And the other thing is you said that it's because we didn't do enough. But the truth is, we read all along that the Republican Party was out there redistricting places and gerrymandering, and we weren't doing that or we didn't know about it. So there is a part as a voter where you feel quite helpless. If this is all going on behind the scenes, then what are we doing?
Let me start with that. So, who draws the maps for your congressional district?
Yeah.
No, but you should know who draws the map for your congressional districts. Who draws the map?
Yeah, your state.
Your state legislator.
Yeah.
Your state legislature draws the maps. Who elects the state legislature? Okay, so you give the majority to the person who's drawing the maps. It's not complicated. How do you think? I'm a grassroots guy. I grew up in D.C., right? And so my thing is I learned from some of the best in politics, mostly Democrats. Mayor Marion Barry, for example, was a political mentor of mine, and he always talked to me about how to work the streets. How do you work the neighborhoods? How do you use that opportunity to figure out how you move in space? When I move into Maryland, it's a whole different ballgame. Oh, we have a state legislature in Maryland, and there's a governor, and all right, so where's the power center? Okay, in D.C., the power center was shared between the Congress and the mayor and the city council. In a state, it's a different situation. The power center is the governor and the state legislature. The state legislature is the one that draws the lines, that tells you how many congressmen you're going to have and where you're going to have them. So what I figured out was, okay, while everybody's dancing on the federal tip, I'm a state guy, right? The grassroots guy. I live in a state in which our state legislature of 149 members, 42 of them are Republicans. Our state Senate is 49 members, and 14 are Republicans. That's the way it's been in Maryland, period. All right? So I'm looking at that. I sued the governor. When he drew the map in 2000, I was state party chairman. I sued the governor, Governor Glendening. I said, this map is wrong because this map does not, and here's the funny part, I was arguing for the Democrats, for African-American Democrats, because we weren't going to elect any Republicans in Prince George's County. There are only 58,000 out of 800,000 people. So we weren't electing him. So I'm arguing for the fairness of the system in my state. And we won. I beat the governor. He was forced to redraw some of the maps. And we created seats in African-American districts that were because of the way the Democrats drew the lines, because we weren't drawing the lines in Maryland, Democrats were. And they were disempowering African-American voters because you have 3 out of 8 seats in Prince George's County that were majority African-American districts, but because of the way the lines were drawn, they protected white senators. I was like, well, that doesn't seem right. So my point is, the power is in your hand when you're looking at the process. And the citizens are the one who ultimately, that's why I keep saying we are where we are, because this is where we want to be. You don't like redistricting, then unelect the legislature that's drawing the lines. Give the majority to a party that wants to draw fairer maps. Because that's where the maps are drawn. You can talk all day long about Republicans controlling the congressional district, but no one complained when Democrats controlled the House of Representatives for 40 years. Not one person complained about redistricting on the Democratic side then. Nobody was looking for fairness then when you had the majority for 40 years. And Republicans figured it out. Newt Gingrich figured it out. In 1994, they took the power. And how did they do it? They went after who drew the lines. And so that's how you begin to change the system. Look at where the power is centered. It's ultimately in your hands. As I said before, you're my elected officials. Why am I giving you all my power?
The problem with that right now, a few comments on your question. First of all, I don't want to lose the first sentence of your question. We were living here and we're not a swing state. I'm a huge advocate of the national popular vote.
Same here.
And by the way, Donald Trump won the popular vote in 2024, and that to me helps my argument. I'm not afraid. If you won the national popular vote, fair and square. By the way, we won it by more in 2020, notwithstanding your
And by the way, real quick,
lie.
Donald Trump actually supports the national popular vote.
Pardon me?
He does. He did an interview in which he absolutely says, yeah, I support it. Now, he thinks, regardless, he would have won. But I'm just saying that, on that issue.
But this is a moment where, and there's this thing called the National Popular Vote Compact. Maryland was the first state to pass it. And what it says is the following. We will instruct our electors to give, to go with the person who wins the national popular vote as long as states totaling 270 electoral votes do the same. We're up to about 210.
Yeah, we're 61 votes away from 270.
Yeah. So we're making progress, but progress is slow. And the reason I bring that up is because of what you just said. And by the way, our data, like in the swing states where where Vice President Harris was, the margins were far closer. Why? Because you're talking to voters. You're getting them involved. And so, that is really important. But, the gerrymandering issue went to the Supreme Court. And gerrymandering and dark money, in my judgment, have brought our democracy to its knees. Because the problem which I think you've highlighted, is that elected officials are picking their voters. Voters aren't picking their elected officials anymore. And the Supreme Court punted. They said, this is too hard. Come on. You do hard things all the time. When we were dealing with contraception, that was hard back in Griswold. You do hard things all the time. And the reason why I'm a little bit verklempt about this is because there's so few seats genuinely in play. And if we want to solve this crisis of democracy, here's the problem. If your goal as a Republican or a Democrat, this is not a partisan comment, is to get reelected, for 90+% of them, if a tough vote comes up, immigration, your number one concern, if you're a Democrat, is a challenge to your left, and your number one concern as a Republican is a challenge to your right. That is a recipe for gridlock. And that's
Stop
why.
you there and take another question because we don't have that much more time. This young woman in the green? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi there.
First of all, thank you so much for being here today
Thank
and
you.
speaking. This is very interesting. So I have a question. Tom, you were saying that one of the main reason that the Democrats lost to Trump was not understanding the economic struggles of the average person. And I'm wondering what you think the role of suppressing competition within the party was in influencing that election too, because another Brown alum, Dean Phillips, tried to run for president as well. He couldn't really get a debate. He was kind of blacked out on MSNBC, couldn't really get a lot of CNN coverage. And he has said that that's because internally within the party, people didn't want to have an open primary. They didn't want to see him compete against Biden. And so then we got to this place where the candidate switched to Harris really late. So why was there no open primary? And do you think that impacted the result?
I know Congressman Phillips, and I would, I guess, respectfully observe that if there had been 3 more primary contests, he would have gotten 10%, 20%, 20%. So I'm not sure it would have been a contest of any import. I don't think it would have moved the needle. In 1980, there was a contest, Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy. And Jimmy Carter did win that primary. Some argue that hurt him going into the general election. We can debate that, but I won't. But I think our biggest challenge is that in the end of the day, it didn't have as much to do with that as it did. Joe Biden was 80 years old, and people thought he was too old. And he had implied. At least a lot of people thought that, I was going to be a bridge to the next generation. And then he ran and people felt that he shouldn't have done that. And the economic pressures, if you look globally right now, incumbents are, and this cuts across ideology, incumbents are underwater everywhere. If you look at the G7, and so we knew we had headwinds, and I don't think this was not an optimal situation. You change your standard bearer 4 months before the election, and I really give a lot of credit to the vice president for what she did. She really stepped up in a remarkable way. But we underestimated. I think the biggest reason we lost is we need to really better understand voters and what I said at the outset about the fact that, for a lot of voters, things aren't getting better for them. And when we kept saying that, 16 million jobs, yes, you are. No, I'm not. And you're not hearing me, and you're not respecting me. And I think that was the bigger challenge for us.
We have a question on that side. Yeah.
Hi. So this is going to be a question on grassroots organizing, how to build up that. So I am a registered Democrat. I'm going to be a small money donor for a foreseeable future. And recently Politico reported that a group of corporate Democrats got together and said that we need to decrease the influence of small donors in the party. And that has me worried. How do I, as a young person, as someone who wants to organize and help build up an opposition to Trump, suddenly see that I am not valued within a party that has a lot of, in politics in general in America. Citizens United has made a lot of corporate money very, very influential. And how do I push back?
I am very confident they will not succeed if they try to do that. You know what the biggest small dollar fundraiser was? I haven't looked at the 24 data, but going into 24, it wasn't Obama, it was Joe Biden. Joe Biden. And thank you for what you've been doing toward that end. That was an indispensable, if I look at things that I'm most proud of, we built out a small dollar fundraising operation that really, really worked. And that's because we gave young people a seat at the table and a voice. And, people felt agency. And, and I also have to give credit to Senator Sanders because, he really, really put small dollar fundraising on the map. So I don't mean to skip over that because that was an indispensable part of our understanding. And what we did in 2020 as a result, you may recall the rules for the debate. First time it's ever been done. How do you get on the debate stage? It wasn't just your polling. You also had to demonstrate that you had attracted a certain number of grassroots donors. And by the way, now the Republicans did that in the subsequent. That is part of the landscape, I think, moving forward forever. And that's something that we did for the first time in 2020. So keep it up. And if you read a story like that, it ain't going to happen.
So I'm actually going to take privilege here and ask a question for both of our panelists, starting with Michael Steele. So you've talked a lot about the economy and the discontented voter and the sort of increasing, percentage of the Republican Party that is got high school or a little bit less than college education. So two things. One, 2024 election, you haven't talked about racism or misogyny. And when it comes to Kamala Harris, or even just a woman like Hillary Clinton running for president. So tell us a little bit about, from the Republican vantage point, what in 2024 you have the culture of Trump, people wanting to really support this guy who they think won but didn't get the presidency, kind of rooting for a team that lost the Super Bowl and you want to go back and win. But, how deep is that strain in American politics, particularly at the executive level for women, despite lots of advances for women legislatively? And the second question is really about relitigating. You talked a little bit about reinventing and pivoting. And so we hear a lot of this from the Democrats, but there doesn't seem to be a national leader emerging for the Democrats. And for the Republicans, I think you're spot on. There will be a contest in 28, and it's unclear who will inherit the Trump mantle. So could you talk a little bit about the space for women to come into play, and in particular 24, race and misogyny? And then the second question really is, you are putting the onus on individuals to organize and be vigilant, and I think that's right. That's Tocquevillian, that's democracy, that's the backbone of America. But they also respond to leaders, as they have to Donald Trump. So who are those emerging leaders, or who could those leaders be?
So on the Republican side, there's always been a very tough understanding, discussion around issues related to race. The party was formed out of the idea of freeing black men and women who were enslaved. It broke away from the Whigs and found its voice under the leadership of Abraham Lincoln, who was himself very conflicted on the matter of slavery. But for conversations and experiences shared with him by the likes of a Frederick Douglass that helped shape and form the Emancipation Proclamation, and that ultimately moved him off of the idea of just put him on a boat and send him back, to putting his presidency on the line for ultimately costing him his life, the party has always had this sort of strained relationship. A lot of it is born out of the fact that we're still fighting the Civil War today. America doesn't want to admit that because, of course, we don't want to talk about race in that vein. But it is true. We're still fighting the war. We never settled Reconstruction. We stopped Reconstruction. President Lincoln's vice president, who became president, Andrew Johnson, killed it because he was a segregationist. And the South still wanted what the South wanted. We are a country that memorializes Confederates who stood in opposition to our government. And so when people say, we really shouldn't do that, folks get pissed. And no one really answers the question why. And that has resonated inside the Republican Party. I've had to deal with it. I remember the day I got elected chairman of the RNC. And someone I'd known as a county chairman, state chairman, I'd gotten to know her over the years in the roles I played. She comes up to me, she gives me this big hug, and she says, "Oh, I'm so excited by your election." And I said, "Really?" She says, "Thank you." She goes, "Now African Americans will join the Republican Party." And I looked at her, I said, "No, they won't." And she looked stunned that I would say that. And the reason I said that is like, I'm not a Pied Piper. Black folks don't wake up the next day and say, "Oh, damn, they done elected a black man chairman. Let me join." You still have to do the work. And part of the work is understanding fundamentally where the country is. And understanding as a party that once embraced the civil rights of African American, now is a party that rejects that. Rejected for the first time by Barry Goldwater, who walked away from the civil rights agenda, right, in the 64 campaign. Cemented by Richard Nixon, that leveled up the Southern strategy in the 68 campaign, where the appeal was directly to white Southern segregationist men who were so pissed at Democrats for embracing civil rights for Johnson, who himself was a segregationist, finally said, okay, signs the bills, voting in civil rights. Right? So that tension has always been a big part of our historic narrative. And the Republican Party right now, and I wrote a piece on this I recommend to you on MSNBC Daily a couple of weeks ago, in which I talked about Reagan. But it was in the context of Ukraine and the position of the party around, standing with our allies, Reagan, that's the evil empire, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, all of that stuff, right? That the party was really. Now the party's like, can't bend over backwards fast enough. Is that me dinging? Sorry. Bend over backwards fast enough to embrace Putin and Putinism. And so I asked the question that maybe Reagan was the outlier. Maybe Reagan and what he espoused on that stage was the outlier. And then I started thinking about it in terms of everything else. And maybe the party, for the first time, we're all seeing it for what it really is. And that everything else that's been put before is more the illusion, is not the real who we are as Republicans. And a lot of us are grappling with that question right now.
I'm going to stop you there and give the floor to Tom
No,
Perez.
I'm going to be very quick because I know there's other questions. Misogyny absolutely played a role in the vice president not winning. And I'll be dadgummed if we're not going to keep trying, period.
All right. We're going to go. Yes, you have a question? We're giving you the mic.
I happened to be in D.C. on Inauguration weekend, and I was visiting a friend, and I to this day, I have the image of all of those the MAGA people with all their merch, and it was just surreal. And people started lining up. When they canceled the parade, we were at Ground Zero. She lives on like E Street, and so you could see people lining up at the CAP Center and all around for blocks and blocks and blocks. And then that was the night before. And then the day of the inauguration, it wasn't clear that. It was clear the parade was canceled, but the line doubled and it tripled, and there were people.
So we need We need to ask a question.
All right.
Thanks.
So there were white people, brown people, everybody, young, old, it's diverse. What you described as the Republicans of today, and we were in a cafe, and there was a couple who had a loaf of bread for food. I don't think they had enough money to, get the full menu. And it was so telling. And I'm wondering, what are those people thinking now? Are they like the farmers, and are they satisfied with this is, as you say, what they wanted, and what's going to happen with what they have? Because I don't think this is what they thought when they cast their vote.
Well,
so do you have predictions on it? On that?
I left my West Wing office at about 7 p.m. on Sunday, January 19th. It was very surreal. I will stop there. The challenge in the moment is to localize the impact. It's not to talk about 30,000 feet. It's to talk about the number of veterans who are no longer being served because of the layoffs. It's to talk about the veterans who have been laid off. It's to talk about the fact that when you effectively shut down the Department of Education, you know who the real victims are going to be? Going to be kids with disabilities. Are going to be major victims. Oh, town hall meetings.
Well, it has to happen before people realize.
Well, the reason why they are telling their people do not hold town hall meetings is because this is happening. I again encourage you to watch what's going on in Wisconsin right now. We talked about this earlier today. I coached team sports for 15 years, and sports and politics have a lot in common. Momentum begets momentum. When you start to win, you believe that you can win more. When you continue to lose, you lose your mojo. And in 2009, they had lost their mojo, and under Michael's leadership, they gained it back really fast. Remember that shellacking? Well, we lost in 2016, and we had to rebuild our infrastructure and rebuild trust, and we didn't wait till 2018. We won special elections in 2017. Then we won in Virginia. We won in New Jersey. And you know what? When you win both those states, the following year, if you look at history, turns out really good. Really well, I guess my mother would tell me.
So can you elaborate? You keep referring to Wisconsin, and the great state of Wisconsin, but specifically, what should people be looking for? You said look at Wisconsin.
There's a Supreme Court race on April the 4th. It will determine who controls the majority on the court. And to get to your question about gerrymandering that we were discussing, it will determine whether they can have fair maps, not only in their state races, but in the federal races. And April 4th is rapidly shaping up as a referendum on Elon Musk, because people in Wisconsin are personally feeling the impact of Elon Musk and his 19-year-old assistant, who is telling him who to fire and who not to fire. And if you think I'm joking, I am not joking. His 19-year-old assistant. And if you go to town hall meetings there right now, off the charts. There are billboards all across the state. Elon Musk should not be running Wisconsin. He invested $290 million in the Trump race. One of the reasons I have optimism moving forward about regaining our democracy is that we're localizing the impact of these cuts. We're not just talking about cuts in the abstract. We're talking about the forest ranger who lost her job. We're talking about the healthcare workers. We have eggs are off the charts expensive. And you know what? They fired the people at the CDC who were trying to address the avian flu. And then they had to bring them back. And so this is what we're doing in Wisconsin, and this is what is going to happen in Virginia. Guess who lives in Virginia? A shit ton of federal employees. New Jersey, very similar.
I do want to let Michael Steele address, and then, sir, you had a question, right? So we're going to go to your question
just
after this.
Real quick, I can tell you what's happening inside the party right now. To Tom's point about the town hall meetings, there is a genuine fear about standing in front of a room. So here's the narrative that was pushed out when that happened. The few town halls that happened was that the Democrats had hired people to come and protest. So I'm the congressman in a congressional district that is R plus 17. And I'm hiring Democrats to come, and there are no Democrats in that district. Okay, I know I live in one of those spaces. My voting precinct in Prince George's County is 1,800 people. 6 of them are Republicans. So that's what we're talking about. So that's like saying that I had an event and, hired all these Republicans when there are only 6 that I could potentially hire to come and protest at your town hall. So that's tells you a lot, that the town hall events hurt. They're sticking. And why? Because now, just at the beginning of this, folks, winter is coming. We're about to start spring. No, baby, it's winter. Because everything that is happening now lands in the month of May and June. And that's what they're afraid of right now. This race that Tom is talking about happens in April. It is the leading edge of the storm. And so Republicans are very worried about that. They're very afraid of how the storylines come out about having a Republican member stand up in a hall and have to defend Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Last point on that. I think it's a mistake for Democrats to separate Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Do not create the vision of Elon, because inside MAGA, what they want, well, not take that back. Yeah, no, inside MAGA, I was thinking something else. Inside MAGA, they want Elon to be the guy that takes the bullets, takes the incoming. Trump wants that too, because there will come a point where he will need to jettison him, for sure, but he will be protected enough to save his numbers so his numbers don't take a hit. Hit his numbers. Link the two. Because if you don't, then this becomes about Elon, not Trump. And you already hear it. You already hear it out there among some of the voters. Well, Elon is getting in Trump's way. No, baby. Elon is doing what Trump wants him to do. So you need to understand how to connect those dots again, because the Republicans are afraid when you do. And they know that sets up, to Tom's point, what happens in Virginia, which is a big, important gubernatorial race this November, and New Jersey, which sets up again, narratively, what happens in 2026.
So our last question, this gentleman, and then we'll break, and you can say hello for just a couple minutes. But we're getting to the witching hour.
Great, I'll try and be concise. So I kind of want to ask, because both of you have both been leaders of your party, or not the president, right, but the DNC-RNC. What is your envisioned role for the parties moving forward? I think we're hearing from both of you how people are disenfranchised. But I think that kind of comes from this lack of centrism within our politics. We've now entered this binary of hyperpartisanship. I can't say it. You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Anyway.
Hyperpartisanship.
Yes, thank you. But I think that might be, by the way, that we're picking our candidates. I'm curious if, for example, I'm from Pennsylvania. If we're a swing state, we care about what Pennsylvania's voice is in the national election. Why are we some of the last people to vote in the primary, right? What are the structural ways in which the parties can restructure themselves, not from messaging, but from an actual organizational way? that can influence and maybe bring us closer back toward the center instead of favoring people who get headlines on CNN and stuff like that?
Go ahead.
So
It's a great question. And, again, plan, execute, reflect, iterate, get better. Iowa no longer goes first. And there's a reason for that. Because Iowa is not demographically or in any other way representative of the Democratic Party. And the reason we have
although there is a
subsidies-
Brown graduate who has a possible future in
No,
Iowa
I
politics, Rob
hear you.
Sand, who's the
He's the only elected Democrat
Yes,
statewide.
he is. He went to
yeah.
Brown.
But I mean, the reason we have ethanol subsidies was because of Iowa primary politics. Okay, and so we changed that. So I think what you will see happen in the next cycle is that same level of review. I know the party is doing a lot of work, and so are the allied members of the ecosystem. I'm involved with one organization. We're doing a lot of listening right now because we do too much talking and not enough listening. And we've got to understand, why are we losing young voters? Why are we losing non-college educated voters? How did that data point I showed you in Texas, what do we need to do to earn your trust back? So a lot of that is going on. And I encourage you to stay involved because, we want to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table in that process. Your question before about grassroots, what we did in the debate, which again was the first time that was done, that was the result of feedback from young people. So I've never had an original idea in my life. But I try to listen to folks who are smart.
Just real quick on that point. So when I was RNC chairman, our process is set up that each presidential cycle, the committee, the national committee, the convention rather, national convention charges the national committee to take a review of our process. So you can't do it in cycle. So you can't do it now. But you can do it in the next presidential if the convention says, hey, you can take a look. So after 2008, they said the next chairman should take a look at our process. I did. And it didn't go so well because what I had recommended was that we blow up the process. I'd actually recommended eliminating the primary altogether and effectively creating a system that would allow our candidates to run and basically the top 5 or 6 would go into a general election kind of space and we'd pick a winner. That didn't go over well. Iowa, New Hampshire were really upset that they get bumped. So I said, all right, fine. Why don't we then just have a situation in which the states can rotate? Again, why do we start with Iowa? I've yet to figure out. I love Iowa, and I know Mr. Sands, and we have some good Republicans but Iowa is the least demographically relatable state in the country in terms of a presidential candidate trying to hone a message that's going to speak to people who don't live in Iowa. And it just layers up a number of problems that we see presidential candidates have later on, particularly when the media, again, starts portraying that horse race in a way that it's outcome dispositive, that it's going to determine who the next president is going to be. No, it does not, because if you look at the history, winning Iowa doesn't guarantee the presidency. So the whole system needs to be reviewed and deconstructed, because it is designed right now in a way to favor a handful of states, which is why both Tom and I support the national popular vote. The national popular vote, when we get to those 61 electoral college votes, and we will. I've predicted the 28 election for the last 5 or 6 years. Some say 32, but whether it's 28 or 32, when that happens, the whole game changes. Because now a presidential candidate is not starting his race in Iowa, right? Why? Because he needs to go and start amassing votes, not electoral college votes, but but popular votes, because those popular votes out of states with populations that vote in large numbers will begin to matter more. And so it reorients the whole stage, number one. And number two, it moves and forces a candidate to the center of the playing field, because I can't be MAGA when I need votes out of California. I'm not going to win California, but I'm going to get the 5 million Californians who go home at 5 o'clock after the evening on their way home from work, because on the East Coast, they just called the election, right, at 8. And so the reality now is you can't call the election at 8 p.m. Eastern, because you're still mining votes on the West Coast to turn out your numbers. So we have, again, the power to reconfigure this system by getting behind initiatives like ranked choice vote and Final Five voting, national popular vote, as citizens through our state legislatures, because that's where the game is played. The state legislatures are the one who put national popular vote in place, not Congress. So it matters who you elect at the state legislative level, who want to be inclined to change the way the system plays out to address fundraising. Some people talk about the use of money in the game, as well as how we vote.
So I'm going to give the Brown alum the last couple of minutes.
Well, thank you. One quick
Tom Perez.
reminder. First of all, thank you. My daughter took her course in 2015. So
American presidency.
she told me that you better say hi to Professor Schiller for me. So thank you for your leadership here. You are a force of nature, just as Ed Beiser was a force of nature for me when I was here. Just to eliminate the confusion, just so you know, walking out, Canada is our friend, Russia is not. Okay? In case you were wondering, I just wanted to remind you of that. But the question gets asked, and it was asked here, and I don't believe that I answered it enough, which was, where are our leaders? And, when I reflect back on how we were able to turn things around in 2017, the honest answer to the question is the leaders were the women who showed up on January 21st, 2017. The leaders were the young people who came to us and said, here's what you're doing wrong, and here's what you got to do right. The leaders were union members that we talked to and listened to and told us about how I feel disrespected, and they stepped up in big ways. There's Barack Obama is sort of a once in a lifetime, individual, and in a certain way he's made life challenging, because at times I feel like there's this search for the next Barack Obama. And the good news is we love Barack Obama. I loved working with him, but you know what? He would be the first to tell you that you were the leaders who stepped up. And I'm seeing this already. This town hall stuff, it's going to take off. And I apologize for being a broken record on Wisconsin, but that's the first place. I told you about, coaching sports. That's going to be the first victory. And then you start getting that mojo moving forward. And as we think about, and again, I'm going to channel my Professor Meiklejohn moment here. I tend to look globally because, I grew up in a bilingual, bicultural environment. And, I think about places like Poland. I think about places like Moldova, a remarkable woman in the face of just unrelenting interference by their neighbors from Russia. And they pulled it off. I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by the Polish folks. I'm inspired that Brazil, after 4 years of Bolsonaro, came back. So there are ample examples of how we can indeed turn this around. But it has to be everybody. And we need to have the humility to understand where we have fallen short with young people, with voters across an ideological spectrum. And we need to understand that democracy is about, arithmetic. It's addition. It's not subtraction. And, this guy, we both have gotten our fair share of death threats. And if you leave a message on my voicemail, you will find my daughter's soothing voice on it. Because that was the way to stop people who had gotten my number from saying nasty things. I'm not asking for sympathy on that. I'm not intimidated by that, nor is he, and nor are others. This is a dangerous moment, but it's far more dangerous if we sit home and we allow the appalling silence to take over. And the appalling silence of all too many people in the United States Senate, the United States House, will start to fray when these town hall meetings come out, when we localize what is taking place, when they hear from that 24-year-old Trump supporter who's as earnest as the day is long. And she believed him because he told her, I'm going to take care of you. And that turned out to be a betrayal. And so I'm simply saying, yes, this is a dangerous moment. But you know what? This will not be the last dangerous moment, and it wasn't the first. And we can take hope, comfort, and example and go into school from all of these other countries and jurisdictions right here at home, and what he did in 2009 and 2010, and what we did in 17, 18, 19, and 20. So I want to just say, I love being in this university, and thank you for giving me a few more minutes at the end, because it's not a surprise to me that this auditorium is all filled up, because you understand participatory democracy. So thank you for being here. And on behalf of Michael and I, thank you so much.